awaiting, there was a news that there would be the meeting between the Ukrainian president and the US President Trump. So far there is no unofficial agenda, and it's pretty hard to, you can imagine what would be discussed. But what do I think, which are the things which might be raised, which could be raised and should be probably raised then?
First, what is America's position in support of Ukraine against Russian aggression in the Donbass? What is the American position on reform in Ukraine? How is the United States, what is the United States willing to do to support Ukraine in its war against Russia? These, I think, are the key issues.
What are we speaking now at this stage with this particular administration?
We've seen consistent statements by senior U.S. government officials regarding Ukraine. We know that, Vice President Pence and President Poroshenko met in Europe a few months ago. And of course, Foreign Minister Klimkin was in Washington a month ago and saw the Vice President and saw the President. And the United States in that time essentially reiterated the policies that were pursued by the Obama administration. We know that early in the administration, President Trump wanted to review our policy on sanctions toward Russia, but he wisely stopped doing that. And of course, we know that the Senate just passed legislation increasing sanctions. So I suspect that when Mr. Poroshenko gets to Washington, he will hear from American officials what he has already heard, which is, again, the policy which more or less continues where we've been for the past couple of years. I would like to see a stronger American policy. I believe we should provide defensive weapons to Ukraine. I think it would be a good thing for Mr. Poroshenko to ask for that, and it would be an even better thing for the United States to agree.
How probable is that? Because if there is a major change from, for instance, just the sanction policy, the pressure on Russia using this tool, at least some weeks before or sometime, that there is something is planning, there would be some principle change. You change sanction for something else, there would be something new. Are we really discussing some kind of a new, what are the chances of, any kind of a real shift rather than just proceeding with the current policy?
It's clear, again, that we have, for whatever number of reasons, a policy today on Ukraine which looks rather similar to the one we had. And that's the most likely outcome. But it's also true that for whatever his peculiarities, President Trump kind of understands intuitively the importance of American power. And it's conceivable to me that his administration could recognize what I think is the common sense proposition that helping Ukraine defend itself by providing defensive weapons strengthens our defense policies in Eastern Europe and hastens the day when Russia withdraws from Ukraine, withdraws from the Donbass, and ceases its aggression. And I believe that people around President Trump certainly understand this. And I think President Trump, too, could come to this conclusion. I'm not certain it will come in the next week or two, although it's possible. But over months, I think this is something we'll certainly be striving to achieve, and I think it could happen.
And how it goes with the US-Russia current relation, and in particular, I would separate President Trump.
Well, again, it seemed to me early in the administration, President Trump wanted to give a gift to the Putin of sanctions relief without any Russian action to justify sanctions relief. But for political reasons in Washington, that became impossible. I believe that U.S.-Russian relations are at a very low level. There's no reason why we shouldn't have serious talks. But serious talks means that we represent our interests in those talks, and those interests include stopping Russian aggression in Ukraine, stopping Russian subversion in NATO and EU countries.
If we now, speaking about I won't say just particular with it, but still it's not very often, and it was a long-awaited and is a long-awaited discussion between the two presidents. if not it just Trump, but the circle around, but the the policymaker in DC, what if would be if Ukraine would because so far still the Minsk agreement was the policy. It's supported by the European partners, and there are often talk that there is no alternative to that. So if there would be the decision or idea from the Ukrainian side that no, we would like to have defense weapon, we would like to change this policy at this stage, to what extent it could be supported by Washington?
You saw the statement made by Secretary Tillerson that we're not necessarily going to be bound by previous agreements. And so I think that this is a good way to look, a fresh way to look at this problem. I don't think it's something which either the Russians or the Germans or the French would dislike. In fact, we're hearing from Europe, yes, it would be good if the United States engaged. We're hearing from Moscow the same thing. So I see this as a possibility, and it's a good possibility.
Okay, and finally, can you provide this context of the last 2 weeks, on the sanction on Russia, how important that were, just to understand the current state of affairs?
The Congress has been very concerned since late January, when Trump's people began to talk about reviewing sanctions. They're very concerned that there might be a weakening of sanctions policy. And they want to make clear that this would not happen. And so they proceeded to pass a law to impose additional sanctions. And this is very important by itself, but it'll become even more important if the House of Representatives approves this legislation or approves this, more likely something similar, and they reach agreement and sanctions are imposed.
Can we expect anything from the future possible meeting between Donald Trump and the Russian President Putin? Because that is an intrigue which I think the whole world is watching and waiting, because still we can't clarify those particular relations.
I think it will be hard for there to be a major improvement in U.S.-Russian relations unless Mr. Putin is willing to step back from the aggressive policies he's been pursuing. So I suspect when they do meet, they will try to make it look like a positive meeting. Maybe we'll be able to reach agreement on, again, some issues where we have similar interests, like deconflicting our militaries. But I don't think we'll be able to reach agreement on something large. Although, actually, let me partially amend that. I think it's possible for the United States and Russia to cooperate on Syria.
And my final, again, I'm clarifying a lot, but there where, where there is a lack of information, there where the clarification is needed to have, the speculative discussion. So really, is there anything alternative agreement currently really discussed, or are we speaking that any of the sides, Ukraine, any representative of Ukraine, the government, or anybody would come up with something? So do we really have like a paper, an idea which is really brought to the table?
They may be developing something, for all I know. We've already had to this date alternatives to Minsk, because you had this channel between Surkov and Nuland. And while the French and the Germans initially did not like this channel, eventually they saw its value. So conceivably we may be talking about a renewal of something like that. There's going to be an American envoy for the crisis, and I think it'll be a full-time position, so that person will be looking in all directions for ways to make progress. Minsk and beyond Minsk.